Today, I am going to continue with the book Everyday Consciousness and Primordial Awareness by Khenchen Trangu Rinpoche. And I am starting towards the end of the translator's introduction. I left off at Khenchen Trangu Rinpoche's preface. So, beginning from here, he talks about the Tibetan word for Buddha is sang and ge. And the sang means to purify, the ge means expanded. I've also heard it translated as blossomed. This was added because in Sanskrit, they just used ge or expanded, but Tibetan translators wanted to also emphasize purified. In order for our primordial awareness to reveal itself completely, all the obscurations need to be purified. Now, they are purified with the revealing of primordial awareness, but it is a mistake to think that you don't need to worry about purification, just expansion of primordial awareness. There's a reason why we do all these practices that we do, from meditation to deity practice to various confessions, Vajrasattva, and so forth, that all of them help us purify what is blocking our experience of primordial awareness. To go on, he talks about the method of exposing our primordial awareness, primarily in engaging in meditation. But in order to do that, in order to practice and meditate correctly, we need to understand what primordial awareness is and how it reveals itself. And in order to do that, we need to have the knowledge that gives us the highest understanding, the knowledge gained from listening and reflecting. So really the basis of becoming a fully enlightened Buddha is beginning with understanding through listening and reflecting, and then understanding how this primordial awareness reveals itself, and then finally meditating. He then talks about the Hinayana and the Mahayana approach. When the Buddha first gave the Buddhist teachings, he taught Hinayana, because at this point, his students were all new to Buddhism. And he kept it, you might say, simple, basic with his subjects. He talked about understanding through explaining the five aggregates or the five skandhas: form, feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. He taught about the 18 elements, the six senses, their objects, and the six sense consciousnesses, and described this as a classification of all knowable things, and that this comes from the Abhidharma, which I talked a little bit last week. Then he talked about the six collections of consciousness: the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body consciousness, and the mind consciousness. And he left it at that. He did not talk about other consciousnesses. And I am going to go into these six consciousnesses in great detail when we get into the body of the book. Anyway, from the Mahayana viewpoint, the Buddha explained it in terms of 8 collections of consciousness. And the 7th consciousness is the Klesha mind consciousness, and the 8th is the all-base consciousness. They were not included in the Hinayana explanations. These were teachings that he gave later. And the reason that he did this was that he did not want the 8th consciousness to be mistaken for a self. Quote, "The all-base consciousness functions uninterruptedly like the flow of a river by absorbing imprints as seeds. So this all-base consciousness or 8th consciousness is not solid, it's changing." Then he gets into a little bit of Buddhist logic. So is there a self in the all-base consciousness, he asks. Since sometimes the body is taken to be the self and sometimes also the mind, there is no definite focal point for the self. It obviously follows that the self cannot be construed as being the all-base consciousness either. So to state that a little bit differently, sometimes we think that the self is our body, sometimes we think it's our mind, sometimes maybe we think it's both. And if you look at the all-base consciousness, again, sometimes it might look like it is a self, but at other times it doesn't. If we see things that way, how could it be if there's always this variation and different viewpoints that one person can have? He finally ends the introduction by saying there are two books that are very important in this topic. One by Karmapa Rangjung Dorje in the commentary that distinguishes consciousness from primordial awareness, and Mipam Rinpoche's A Gateway to Knowledge. He says that he is using the Mipam Rinpoche commentary, Gateway to Knowledge, because Mipam Rinpoche describes the all-base consciousness in a much more detailed way by, quote, discriminating between the all-base and the all-base consciousness. And we will see this in greater detail when we get into the book. Now we're into the 6 collections of consciousness, chapter 1. As humans, we have body, speech, and mind. These are called the 3 gates. Speech is sound. It is used for communications. On the other hand, it very quickly dissolves. If there's nothing being said, there is no speech. So he concentrates on the body and the mind because they are a little more enduring. It's not that they're permanent, but they last a little bit longer. Even if we're not moving our body, the body is still there. And our mind, you probably have noticed when you meditate, it's constantly generating thoughts and emotions. A still mind is very rare and unusual. So the question is it one entity, body and the mind? He says it's really very superficial to look at it that way. You really have not taken a deep introspective look and examination of the body and the mind. So then, are they 2 separate entities? Well, the body is substantial, made out of atoms, molecules, physical substance, and the mind that is something that is clear and cognizing. I was asked this afternoon, what is awareness? And I said, well, can you distinguish between suffering and happiness? And the answer was yes. And I said, that is awareness. It's really quite simple in Buddhism. That's what cognizing is being aware. So our mind knows and it understands, it has awareness, whereas our body is just atoms and substance and parts. And we, while we're alive, we can't separate them either. They are interdependent, but we can distinguish between them. This book will analyze mind separately from body. That's an important point to realize. We're looking at the mind for analytical purposes as being separate from the body. Now, the essence of mind is one, but for analytical purposes, we're seeing it as having 8 collections of consciousnesses. And collections here is very important because we're constantly having experiences in all of these collections, and saying that the mind consciousness is one is oversimplifying, because it is a collection of all kinds of different experiences. And the same thing with sight and the other senses. Quote, as long as sentient beings dwell within conditioned existence, mind expresses itself in the form of the 8 collections of consciousness, end quote. So it is through Dharma practice and meditative concentration that we transform them into the 5 kinds of primordial awareness. And there are benefits that he lists. And this is important to know the benefits because this will help motivate us to study these and to practice. The first is that through understanding the contents of the book, this is giving us a map on the path, tells us where we are going. The second is this gives us the result, the end result of traveling the path, these 5 kinds of primordial awareness and the 5 Buddha families. And the third is that there are temporary benefits to our meditation practice. This will help us know how to meditate, how meditation functions. It talks about how to meditate on the body of the deity through visualizations, calm, abiding meditation, and deep insight meditation when we meditate without having an object of meditation. He mentions too that to be able to meditate on the nature of your mind, you ask your teacher for pointing out instructions. I've talked about this in some other classes. You need pointing out instructions from your teacher to help you recognize the nature of your mind. Some recognize it, others get a faint glimpse, especially those that get a faint glimpse. They don't really know and understand how the mind and consciousness function, and it's gone. If you use the teachings on the 8 consciousnesses, you begin to understand the experience, and the experience and your understanding grow. So this, Khenchen Trangul Rinpoche feels, is the most important reason to study this book, to help deepen your experience of the nature of your mind. Talking about deity visualization, he says that confusion can come from not understanding the difference between seeing with the eyes and seeing with the mind. Our eyes, he uses the term coarse, but it's clear what we see with our eyes. The mind is less clear than the eyes, but it's more refined. So don't get discouraged with poor visualizations. It's most important to have confidence that the deity is present and to meditate on the qualities of the deity and that you are visualizing yourself as the deity with these qualities. The next section is the 5 sense consciousnesses. These consciousnesses are divided into 2 categories. One is stable consciousness. The other is unstable consciousnesses. The unstable consciousnesses arise and they vanish. You open your eyes and you see something. You close them and you don't see anything. It's that simple. You hear a sound and the sound is gone, and there might be no sound if you live out where I live. Or there might be the sound of the donkeys across the road too, but the one sound arises and then it's gone. This is what is meant by unstable. It's not continuous. And it's this way with the others. We have the stable consciousnesses are more subtle. No matter what we're doing, they're like background noise. It will not vanish. When we meditate, we notice that we have gross thoughts, strong emotions, strong memories, things that really distract us and pull our attention away. And when our mind calms down and settles more, then we have the subtle thoughts and emotions and so forth. And so this is what is being described here. There always is this subtle consciousness going on. When we meditate, we become more and more aware of. The first 5 consciousnesses, which are sense consciousnesses, are considered thought-free consciousnesses. And then the 6th one, mind consciousness, involves thoughts. That's what mind consciousness specializes in, is thoughts, and more thoughts, and more thoughts. all of the five sense consciousnesses are thought-free because they merely perceive specific objects without any conceptual associations, no commentary, no good or bad, no dislike. And the mind consciousness involves thoughts, afflictive states of mind, judgments, and all kinds of other things. The five sense consciousnesses are called the five gates or gates to the outer world. Now, here's where it starts getting complicated. When he talks about the five sense consciousnesses and then having a specific sense faculty and then having a sense organ. So there are five sense consciousnesses, and each one has these three aspects to it. Each one is specific to what it can do. So the eye sees, it cannot hear. Our nose can smell, but it cannot taste, and so forth. Each one of these is free of thoughts. Each sense faculty is made of light. It's not made out of physical matter, and it's not visible to ordinary beings. And this is difficult to understand, but these faculties, these sense faculties, are talked about because the Buddha talked about them, and very highly realized beings after the time of the Buddha have also mentioned them. They have to do with our subtle body. So the eye faculty, it perceives visible forms. That is what its duty is. Its a specific duty is to perceive visible forms, objects of perception, anything that arises as outer form. There are no other senses that can perceive outer forms. And this eye faculty is extremely subtle, and it's within the eye. The eye organ is the eyeball. He describes it as looking like a blue flax flower, extremely small and subtle, and a clear form of light. If you're wondering what a flax flower looks like, they're small, they're blue, and I have noticed as you go south, like the Madison area, they grow wild all along the side of the highway. As you might say, a weed. They must grow them down there in fields, and then they get spread. Just like we'll have certain flowers that grow along the side of highways up here, down there, it's common to see these beautiful blue flax flowers. The eye faculty, it dissolves at the time of death or when the organ is badly damaged. So a person that is blind will not have this sense faculty. So to go on here, the ear consciousness is the next one, and the sense faculty of the ears, it cannot view forms, it cannot perceive other sense objects, just sound. That is what it does and only does. It can perceive any type of sound, loud, quiet, pleasant, unpleasant, and so forth. The ear consciousness arises in our ear, but it is not the ear itself. These consciousnesses, again, are aspects of mind. So in the ear, we have the ear faculty, and then we have the ear consciousness, and we have the organ of the ear. The ear faculty is described like a knotty protuberance on the bark of a birch tree. I was tempted to go out and take a picture of this on a birch tree here, but I didn't. Anyway, I think many of you have seen birch trees, and it does have these little protuberances on the bark that stick out. And again, this is a clear form. It's a manifestation of light. It's not coarse, but it's extremely subtle. And when it is damaged, it dissolves and is gone. So a person that cannot hear would have this gone. So again, you have the ear, the sense organ, you have the sense faculty, and then you have the sense consciousness that transmits what is being input, you might say, from the outer world to the mental faculty, the mental consciousness, but there is no thoughts that are attached to it. It's just plain transmitting the information. The nose consciousness operates on a similar basis. The object is odors, good smells, bad smells. He said natural smells and also manufactured smells. And of course, I thought, even though natural and manufactured aren't really the continuum that I think of, that if we said natural and unnatural, that would have an unnatural association with it. So I just said that. Now you've got that association, but manufactured, in other words, man-made smells. The nose faculty is subtle. Again, it's made out of light, and it resembles two parallel fine copper needles. The Buddha described these. This is not something that the Tibetans have come up with, that the Buddha described these things. So again, we have the nose organ, we have the nose faculty, and we have the nose consciousness. And as a result, we can perceive smells. Going on to the tongue consciousness. The tongue, its specialty is taste. It has tongue faculty, and the Buddha described this as resembling a half moon, and it is found on the tongue. Again, it's made out of light. This allows us to taste sweet, sour, salt, and so forth. And the tongue consciousness allows us to experience that. The last is the body consciousness, and this is sometimes talked about touch. We can feel with our hands, touch lots of things, and have many different kinds of sensations: soft, hard, rough, smooth. Prick yourself with a needle and it's sharp, and so forth. Inside the body, we also have a consciousness of feeling, or the sensation of feeling. We can feel when our stomach is upset. We can feel when we have a headache. We can feel when we break a bone, when we have sore muscles. This gets a little more complicated than the other sense organs, because this really pervades our whole body outside of our hair and our nails. So the body faculty is a little different. It is in different forms depending upon the part of the body that we're talking about. It's described a bit like the outer skin to inner organs, including our skeleton. Again, this is made out of light, but this allows the body to let us know what's going on inside. Here is a quote: "The body faculty is said to be like the covering skin of the bird, soft to the touch, and it takes shape and color according to the part of the body that it covers." So our skin is skin colored, depends on the person what color that is. And on the bones, it's bone colored. Again, it's just clear manifestation of light. And it is the consciousness that perceives, not the sense organ or the sense faculty. I want to emphasize this. I'll finish up with a final quote: "Perception can only function if three factors come together: an object, the corresponding sense faculty, and the corresponding consciousness." End the quote. If one is missing, there is no perception. The question was, how do these consciousnesses compare with Western science, and the difference? Western science feels, of course, that the brain, the consciousness, is somehow located in the brain, or at least physical. I will have to also say this, that there are some Western scientists that are looking at consciousness a little bit different than purely physical. So there's a range of opinions here in Western science, but traditionally, Western science has looked at consciousness as being in the brain and physical, whereas here, all these consciousnesses, the five sense consciousnesses, are related to the body, but again, they're not made out of substance. If For instance, you would lose your eyes. The consciousness would be no longer functioning because the eye faculty would be gone and your eye organ would not be functioning. At death, consciousness leaves the body entirely and goes on because it's indestructible. So this is a big difference with Western science. Most scientists would say the consciousness for that particular person would end at the time of death. The question is that I know a person who cannot taste, cannot smell, is colorblind, and has had multiple traumatic brain injuries. Does that mean that consciousness or some of them have already left? I would explain it this way, that what has happened is not that the consciousness have left, but they're no longer functioning because of physical reasons. The organs or the sense faculties have been damaged to the point where they are operating poorly or not operating at all. Each of these 8 consciousnesses is a collection of consciousnesses. And this is done for analytical purposes, but in terms of, you might say, the bigger picture, they're not separate, they're interdependent. And so one could not leave while the other stayed. In